Ms. Bauer, can you introduce item number 3?
Council item of special interest, overview of utility capital improvement projects.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, here to give an update for the Utility Capital Improvements Project is Craig Johnson, our Director of Water Services. Come to this chair.
Good afternoon, Mayor, or Vice Mayor, members of the council. I'm actually going to kick this presentation off for you. This item is a result of a request from Councilmember Tomelchoff to go into depth and do an in-depth discussion of the utilities CIP. And so in that context, we're going to do that. I'm going to give a high-level overview first of the utilities capital and its funding. And then Mr. Johnson is going to go through the water services CIP in depth, and Mr. Friedline is going to talk about residential solid waste CIP. We're going to finish up with just reviewing the calendar for upcoming public meetings and next steps. Again, by way of overview, the utility CIP, when we talk about that, we're talking about a very large collection of infrastructure and equipment that is in place to protect the public's health and safety, specifically in regards to delivery of water, cleaning of wastewater and removal of it, and also removal of, in this case, of residential solid waste. The CIP is an investment into that infrastructure. Currently, the water and wastewater asset, just to give you an idea of the scale of that, the water and wastewater asset on the books at its original cost was about $790 million. Conservatively, the replacement cost of that asset, again, just regarding water and sewer, is somewhere between $2 and $3 billion at today's cost. So it is a rather large asset that needs to have, it's kind of like your home where you have a large asset and it needs to be maintained, and that includes major types of maintenance. That type of maintenance is required, again, to make sure that you have a safe and reliable system. On the solid waste side, the assets are not as high dollar in value. They consist mainly of rolling stock, which is, trucks and that type of thing. You can imagine for collection of solid waste, trash and recycle bins. Again, their dollar value is not as high, but there's a need to invest in those assets in an ongoing basis in order to have reliable removal of solid waste. For each of these types of projects, the CIP is meant to address rehabilitation, repair, and in some cases expansion of those facilities. Those are driven by assessments of those same facilities. Mr. Johnson's going to talk about that a little bit in terms of what types of assessments have been done. And there's also reference to master planning that takes place without the city and what is going to be needed, what's there, when does it need to be expanded, and what in anticipation of future growth and things like that. There's a combination of available cash, in some cases development impact fees, and we can also use bond funding to fund that CIP. And I'm going to show you on the next slide. Sorry, let me go back 1 second. I got my slides out of order on my hands here. These utilities are enterprise funds, and for the benefit of the council and the public, we want to remind everyone that utility enterprise funds are meant to be self-supporting, which means that their user fees and charges are designed to cover the cost of the services that are provided, and those citizens who use more of the service pay more of the share of those services. They are not subsidized by general fund tax dollars, and again, as we already mentioned, each enterprise fund has a significant capital investment. And we started this process off with both utilities by commencing rate studies, mainly because the last water and wastewater rate increase was in the year 2010, and the last residential solid waste increase had been some time ago in 2008. So again, here is where I was going to show you, at least on the water side, again, Mr. Friedline's going to talk in depth about his capital, but on the water and wastewater utility side, if you look at the sort of the left-hand side of this chart, this is a representation of what's in the utilities, the water and wastewater utility CIP. And it's broken down by the type of facility. So we have plants, both water reclamation plants and water plants, water main transmission lines and wastewater collection lines, some infrastructure. There's also the cost to buy water resources, and wells. On the right side of the chart, what I've shown you is, I'm going to call it a simplified version of how that same $198 million in capital, these numbers are all in thousands, so that 198 is 198 million, almost 199 million. And it's a simplified version of showing you how it will be funded. So out of the 198 million, we have available about 54 million, 53.7 million that can come from current fund balance. That's an accumulation of reserves that have occurred over the last several years. This is, by the way, this is the 6-year plan. It includes 2017, and the reason why we went and included 2017 is in part because there's carryover of projects from 2017 here into 2018, and also because this number ties to the number that we showed you during the budget when we were talking about the CIP. It doesn't include the cost of the Pyramid Peak water treatment plant expansion, and that's because that's being solely paid by the city of Peoria. So again, going back to the right side, it's kind of a simplified version of how the capital is going to be paid for. So for the 198 million, we have about 53 million or 54 million coming from fund balance. The remaining fund balance, the utility actually has about 99 million in fund balance, but we have to keep about 45 million in reserve. So that's where we get the first 54 million to pay for capital. And then over the course of the years, every year, some of the rate is already designed to pay for capital. So about another $35 million will come from the current rate structure as they are. In that plan, as we presented it before and you've seen, we also propose to fund a portion of this from future bonds, and that number's about 55 million. And then those proposed rate increases that the council has seen before would pay for the remaining 54 million. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is kind of a simplified version is because part of those proposed rates has to also go to pay off the debt on the proposed $55 million in bonds. So it's kind of an iterative process, but it gives you an idea out of the 198 million, how much of, how it goes to pay for that capital. So I'm going to turn it over, I think, at this point to Mr. Johnson, and again, he's going to go through each of these projects one by one in detail.
Thank you, Ms. Can you hear me? Oh, this thing. Let me hit that one. Thank you, Ms. Rios. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. It's good to be back here with you today. I have a couple of administrative comments. First, I'd like to welcome Mr. Ron Short. He's our Vice Chairman for the Citizen Utility Advisory Commission. He's out in the audience. I also have some staff, technical staff here today to answer any in-depth questions that may come up during today's presentation. Also today we're going to go, if you recall, when we did the posting, we had our white paper in the posting, and it was also posted for the benefit of our citizens. The process we're going to follow today in the slide overview covers this matrix that we had issued to you on June the 6th. So we'll be following this in order because that was the one that was had generated the most discussion. So I wanted to make sure we go down this in order. And as Ms. Rios mentioned, this is a 6-year program, so we basically have the 5-year CIP plus the FY17 items. Our CIP addresses critical infrastructure for our water and sewer operations and keep them ongoing. Like owning a car or a home, you have to keep up on rehabilitation repairs, sometimes doing replacement, and so major items like a fuel pump or an air conditioner for your home don't break down at an inopportune time. It's kind of a personal thing for me. My truck is 1996, and I keep it updated every 3,000 miles, and I'm lucky so far that I didn't break down on the halfway to the White Mountains. So I've not had any inopportune times at this point yet. For water services, our major items are our water and wastewater treatment facilities, distribution lines, sewer pipes, and a number of over 400,000 assets in our system. Through a comprehensive assessment process, CIP projects are identified and scheduled during the budget process. We have discussed these projects with the Citizens Utilities Advisory Commission, and during the current public outreach meetings, we are providing information to the public on our capital infrastructure projects and listening to their feedback. The following overview of projects will briefly explain why it's important and the potential risk if not being done. So first on our list is the Arrowhead Water Reclamation Facility. This project was built in 1985, and it treats 1 billion gallons of water a year. This basically takes the flow from everything in the city of Glendale north of Bell Road. And one of the important things about this project is it cannot be shut down because it's classified as what they call an end-of-line plant. So this thing has been operating ever since 1985. So it's important for us to keep up on our, keep up with the maintenance and keep up with replacement of parts of the process systems, so we can continue to maintain the flow. If we do not, if we have a plant shut down, we only have a few hours to make the repairs, and then we have to go into emergency conditions and try to move the flow to the 99th Avenue interceptor, which would be a very expensive operation. So we do not want to have to go there for our citizens and for the operational staff. As everybody here knows, wastewater is very corrosive, and there are several items needing to be replaced out there. Our odor control systems need replacing, and one of the key points about that is we're so close to our neighbors there on the business development on the Union Hills side of where our plant's located. In addition, the electrical supply system needs replacing. It's the original electrical supply system to ensure that the plant has the power to operate, and also our filters need to be replaced. They're the original filters to ensure we maintain regulatory compliance. If the project's not completed, there's potential for major shutdown, creating additional costs for emergency repairs, and the potential for wastewater overflows, which we want to avoid. Second project.
Yeah, hold on a second.
Yes.
Well, Mayor, are we going to ask, if we have a question, do we ask?
I think that would be a more appropriate, since this
Okay.
is so long, try to remember
All right.
your questions. We might as well just take them as they come.
So, thank you, Mr. Johnson. Thank you, Mayor. Are we creating redundancy here at the Arrowhead Water Reclamation Facility also, or are we just replacing equipment? I was under the impression we were coming up with some sort of redundancy plan in the event that of a failure.
Mayor, Councilmember Tomachoff, in this end-of-line plant, the thing we have to concentrate on that is making sure that our facilities that we add to the plant are on current technology. We're not adding redundancy to Arrowhead because we have no redundant flow. We can't send that flow anywhere else to have it treated. So that's why it's very important that our systems that we have there are replaced, because most of them have reached their end of life. Now, we've had a good track record on Arrowhead. We've replaced the aeration basins in 2006. We replaced the UV 5 years ago. So we're not replacing everything, but the front end of the plant and the filters, as I mentioned, odor control and electrical, those are the primary concerns we have right now.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, members of council, so there are some other projects coming up that do speak to the redundancy, but on this particular project, it's not an issue of redundancy. It's an issue just of outdated equipment or of equipment that's starting to hit the end of their useful life that needs replacement. But Mr. Johnson will be talking about those other projects that do provide some redundancy and resiliency later on in his presentation.
Mayor.
Yes.
Yeah, to that point, I had that note here, and Ms. Tomachoff asked it. So as we go through this, will you identify any of these projects that are just that, are redundant, or you're building a redundant system? So I don't see that it says that, and as Mr. Phelps just mentioned, you're going to speak to that. But any of these that are not written here that are replacing a redundancy or are going to become a redundancy, that we know that.
Okay.
Okay.
Will do. Next project is our asset management program. The existing asset management program that we have, that we're operating with right now, is obsolete, unsupported, and does not meet the needs of our department. This system ensures proper maintenance is being performed on over 400,000 assets and provides analytics to maximize preventive maintenance and minimize our reactive repairs. So that's what we need out of a new asset management system. The project will provide the selection of an asset management system that meets our needs. Having an asset management system saves costs by providing a proactive approach to our maintenance. Emergency repairs are costly and likely to inconvenience our citizens. Having a system to ensure maintenance and offering an appropriate interval assists with ensuring assets are maintained cost effectively and extend the useful life of our asset. So this will increase our reliability in our management of our facilities once we get the new asset management system on board.
Mayor.
Question?
Mayor, is this going to be Water Services' share of the asset management program? I know we were talking about doing a citywide asset management. Is everybody doing a separate asset management program, or I'm a little bit confused?
Mayor, Councilmember Tomachoff, we've, in our early preliminary assessment of asset management right now, Public Works is involved with us on the facilities for asset management. And I think at some point when we get to a certain stage here, then Mr. Friedline will take a different angle and determine how he wants to move forward with the asset management, but they are involved in our process up to this point. But this funding in here is for Water Services.
Okay, so this would be Water Services' cost of their piece of the program. Okay, thank you.
Mayor.
Councilmember Clark.
Thank you. What you use terminology in terms of project status, and you say underway, under assessment. What does that exactly mean?
Well, currently, we have a contract with Black & Veatch to perform a early assessment for us to determine what are our real needs in the Water Services Department. They're going to take all of our input, they're going to outline it, and they're going to put it in a scope of work that will be approved by our department, and then it will be put into an RFP and sent out for people to do submittals on. And then from that point, we will select who we think is the appropriate vendor for the asset management system, but we're not at that stage yet.
Mayor, if I might continue.
Councilmember Clark.
Would you consider this an emergency situation or just something that needs to be done in the course of time?
Mayor, Councilmember Clark, I think emergency is too strong a word, but this is something that we absolutely need. We're using Hanson right now. We can't even get all of our assets in there, and it's only been suitable for us to help track our work orders. But we have so much more analytics and so much predictive behavior that new asset management softwares will allow us to have. We have so many assets, it'd be great to be able to manage our maintenance and be able to tell and predict when our equipment is planned to be or may fail, so we can plan accordingly, and also it'll help us develop our CIP in the future.
So without all these new capabilities of an asset management program, how have you managed to function?
Mayor, Councilmember Clark, intensively. We have staff that spends a lot of time and effort manually looking at the equipment, manually tracking the work orders, manually making sure that we're managing our equipment, and they're just not getting to all of it. And so basically, when you're not getting to all of it, basically you're reactive and you're it's not acceptable to wait till it breaks to have it fixed, because that wastes time, it wastes money, and it impacts our citizens.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor.
Councilmember Earl Diamond.
Thank you, Mayor. This work order system that you have now, you said it's outdated. How old is that?
It's Hanson 7.0. I don't know. It's very old.
10 years?
Do we have a feel for the age of that system?
It's over 10 years. Over 10 years old.
Oh.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Next item is our West Area Water Reclamation Facility. This plant treats 2.7 billion gallons of water annually, and it takes all the flows from Bell Road to Camelback. So and then when we talk a little bit more about the sub-regional operating group, some of the flows coming out of Camelback will go down to our partner at 91st Avenue Wastewater Treatment Plant at the Shrog, and the rest of it goes to our West Area Water Reclamation Facility. Glendale does not own enough Shrog treatment capacity to send all of our flow to Shrog, and if it did, it would increase our O&M cost by about $3 million a year.
Could you, rather than use an acronym, actually say what that is for the people listening?
Yeah, the sub-regional operating group, which is basically the Phoenix's 91st Avenue Wastewater Treatment Plant. The City of Glendale is a part owner in that facility. Additionally, Glendale would not benefit from the effluent recharge credits if we sent all of our flow to Shrog, and would not be able to provide effluent to Camelback Ranch, Cabela's, and Hero Falls, or any other current or future development needing our effluent water. Recharge credits cover surface water shortages, emergencies, and future economic development. This project provides for the replacement of a number of pieces of equipment, our bar screens, our grit removal, and our odor control, and our replacement of outdated ultraviolet disinfection systems, and which are more reliable and have a lower operational cost, which is going to save us about $50,000 a year. So the reliability is an important factor for this project. This project can come offline, and we can send our flow to the sub-regional operating group or Shrog, but a number of these components have reached the end of their life, and they need to be maintained, and to improve those, we will be improving the reliability of the plant.
Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. Here you say that it was built in 2000, and that if the facility is unable to operate, the flows will go to SROG 91st Avenue. So if it was built in 2000, what was the life expectancy of that? We're at 17, so was it 20, 25?
Mayor, Councilmember Adama, most of our plant facilities, their life expectancy is 50 years. But you do repairs and rehabilitations all through that 50-year life cycle of a facility. In this particular case, we've been in place now for 17 years, and going back to the corrosiveness of that wastewater and having to treat that every day, it eats away at all of your metal and your concrete and everything that you have for your process. So that therein lies where the damage is coming in with the fact that it's just treating wastewater 24 hours a day.
Mayor, so with that said, thank you. So it sounds like the way it's worded here is that we're on the brink of failure. So if that's the case, how close to failure are we right now?
Mayor, Councilmember Adama, I'd like to put it this way, that we are at any time subject to a failure for the plant or subject to a process part of the plant, because the front end of the plant is basically in dire need of replacement of our grit and our bar screens and our separation. If that tends to pile up, it's going to stop up the plant and we won't be able to operate the plant.
So again, it's giving the sense to the residents that we're on the brink of failure. If this facility is unable to operate, well, define that. So there's some preventive measures we can do on the front end that you're speaking of, but define the depth of corrosion that we have that would have a complete system failure that now we wouldn't be able to operate. Where are we with that? How close is? How do you define that?
No, those are good questions, Mayor. Councilwoman Adama, I'd like to bring up my deputy for plant facilities. Ron, would you come up?
Good afternoon, Mayor, Councilmember Aldama. I guess my response to your question would be, you know, as Craig said, certain aspects of the plant have a shorter life cycle than the entire plant. And plants also have built-in redundancies in them, so we may have one piece of it fail, but another one takes its place, but we got to fix the one that failed. The other issue that we're having, especially with the headworks that Craig mentioned at the west area, is it's causing operational type problems where stuff is getting through the screens that shouldn't and through the grit that shouldn't, and it's affecting our ability to treat the water properly. So we're able to continue treating the water properly, and if we don't replace these things when they fail, we have to replace it on an emergency basis, and it costs more money because you got to get a contractor in there on short notice, and usually it costs more to do it that way. So what we try to do is plan our projects so that before it fails, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to take the whole plant out of service. It may take a portion of it out of service and reduce our capacity some, but we're still able to operate. And what we're currently seeing is some of our capital projects that are planned before the project is delivered, we're having components fail, and we're going out and replacing them. We're not completely shutting the plants down, but we are in a kind of panic mode because we're not as redundant as we'd like to be, and since they can't really shut off, it affects that redundancy.
Mayor. So thank you for that. So let me just give you an example to maybe just clarify what I'm trying to say. And I'll just give you an example of the school district here down the street where I serve as a board member. We had some buildings that a civil engineer put his stamp of approval on and said, you are in immediate danger of collapse. Your children cannot occupy these schools. There's a signature and there's a defined date that you have to get out, and that was yesterday. So going back here, we're telling folks, if this facility is unable to operate, that tells me, God, we're on the brink. We are like right there. So has anybody gone to the facility and said, here's my stamp of approval. You have 2 years of life on that, and you are done?
Mayor, Councilmember Aldama, in this particular case, yes. And what we do is we hire engineering firms to come in and do an assessment, a condition assessment of the equipment. And what they typically come back with is they go through a scoring process and say, okay, this particular piece of equipment needs to be replaced pretty quickly. Some of it is an emergency, and we have to do it immediately. Or most likely it's you should replace this within a year, this within 2 years, and you got 5 or more years on these other things. And that's the process we go through. Using your example, there's nothing that we're doing that's unsafe, or we're not putting our staff in danger. We're not in a situation that's a critical safety issue.
Okay, that doesn't satisfy my question. It just,
Well, Mayor, may I, Councilman Adama, if we don't do something and move on this thing, it could become an issue with safety and health, and that's why we want to do the things that we have to do out there now.
yeah, I guess what I'm asking is, are we a year away from that? Are we 2 years away from that failure? How do we determine that? That's the questions we have to ask. We have to answer to the constituency.
Well, I'll talk a little bit and then you can chime in. Those are great questions. The good advantage that we have right now is if that plant goes down, we can ship that flow to the 91st Avenue wastewater treatment plant. That buys us a little time to start working on a correction for the process out there. So I don't know if you want to pick up on any more of that, but I wanted the council and our citizens watching today that if that plant goes down, in this particular case for this plant, we have an option to send the flows on an emergency basis and gives us some time to fix that plant, but we don't want to go there. We want to be able to stay proactive and work on the plants and the process systems and keep up in front of them so we avoid having this type of activity and end up doing emergency work, which is very costly and time-consuming and very disruptive to our operation.
Mayor, lastly, so how you're answering is that this is a proactive measure, and I get it. We do that at home. We do it with our vehicles. If you don't change the oil in 3 months, this is what's going to happen. I get it. It's a proactive measure, being preventive, but I just don't see a timeline on here. It's kind of harsh when we tell folks that if this doesn't operate, this is what's going to happen, but we don't have a timeline. Like, hey, we need to do this within the next 2 years or complete failure will occur. So.
Councilmember Clark.
I would like to follow up on Councilmember Aldama's discussion. Here's the problem for me as I went through, and I've been through your list of projects a lot of times. You identify 2 of them as W01, or W1 I'll call it, that are critical and of an emergency nature. Both of them are ongoing, water capital equipment and wastewater capital equipment. You identify 2 projects as critical in terms of safety and legal compliance. They're W2s. Ongoing critical safety, citywide meter vault improvements, legal compliance underway, White Mountain Apache water rights. Then you lumped nearly every other project with the exception of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Every other project is a W3, critical. There's no refinement or discernment of out of those W3s, what is the most critical need that must be satisfied immediately, and what of those W3s can be phased in over the next 5 years? And I keep waiting to see that kind of information so that we can make, I mean, it's all tied in with water rates, and when we make a decision on water rates, it's based upon a menu of every project that appears to be critical. They can't all be critical. Some are more critical than others. And that's what I keep hoping to hear is, what are the things that, oh my God, the world's going to fall in if we don't do them tomorrow? And which are the projects that, they're serious, but we do have breathing room and we do have a year or 2 or 3 before they have to really, really be attended to. And I don't think that requires an answer. It's more of just a general comment that has been my difficulty in looking at these projects since we heard about them.
Mr.
Thank you,
Phelps.
Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, I can understand kind of that. Excuse me. I can understand the concern. Remember the opening statements by our Budget and Finance Director was that our overall infrastructure has a replacement value today north of $2.5 billion. So really what we've identified is about 10% of our overall infrastructure is what our staff is recommending needs to be focused on and worked on. If our whole system was worth $200 million and we're saying everything has to be replaced today, that would seem to be out of alignment. Why is everything critical? But just as a reminder, we've got an extensive amount of below ground and above ground infrastructure. This represents really 10 to 15% that we are recommending from our consultants and from our engineers to consider for replacement, so we're being proactive in it.
Mayor, may I respond?
Yeah.
And I understand that it represents 10 to 15% of the overall infrastructure capital investment. But some of these are more critical than others. And that's the kind of information this council needs to know to make a decision, because I'll tell you what I'm having a problem with. Over the next 5 years or 6 years, whichever number you care to use, water and sewer are asking basically for a 30% rate increase over that time span. Sanitation, it's closer to 50% over that time span. That is a tremendous increase that is proposed almost immediately. And if you're going to go to the public, and we represent the public, and say, by God, we need a 30% increase over the next 5 to 6 years, I know that some of these projects are more important than others. You can't tell me that something like replacing fire hydrants or water system security, which is a redundant project, is as important as citywide meter vault improvements. And that's where I'm coming from. I need a hierarchy of importance other than a lumped sum of importance, so that council could consider, for instance, okay, we're willing to approve your top 10 projects. I'm just being hypothetical. Your top 10 projects for this year. And if we approve those top 10 projects, what would be the rate increase that would follow as a result? That's the problem I'm having. I don't know about the rest of council, but I just think that, and I understand the need. We went through the recession. We didn't spend a dime on things we needed to spend money on. So I understand the need, but I'm just having trouble, and I'm sure there are citizens out there too, who are having rate shock right now because of the tremendous increases. When we increased in previous historical years, those increases were not this high. We're looking at 7.5, 7.5, 5, 4.5, 4.5. That's 30% over 5 years. And I'm just looking at, is there any way we can mitigate? Is there any way we can stretch this thing out? Is there any way we can reduce the initial impact to the citizens that we represent? Thank you, Mayor. It's a comment, not a question.
Yeah, I actually want to ask him a question. Initially, you said this was a 6-year project. Basically, you're looking out for the next 5, 6 years. How long will it take to get all of this done that you're requesting? How many years will that take?
Mayor, council members, the 6-year plan is we're hoping this cash flow and these projects will be done within that 6-year period.
Okay. Meanwhile, you'll have other things coming on because anything that's being used every day is going to wear out. So you have lots of other equipment that's going to be coming up also, correct?
Mayor, council members, that's correct. Now, this particular project, West Area, is going to carry through, and not only the 5-year period, which is through 2022, but it also has some cash flow to get us into 2023. So there will be 1 extra year for this particular project right here. Yeah. If I may, I'd like to make a comment in reference to Councilmember Clark's comments. I hear what you're saying. We have a plan or a program here that has been behind schedule for longer than I've been here and being your director. One of the important things, it took us 3 years to get this to a program, or to program identified to where we needed to provide you good hard information as to what we needed from you. This list is there. If you recall, we have some catch up to do. During the downturn, we did not do any rate increases since 2010. So we've had inflation raises up to 13% during that same period. So I'm not going to sit here and defend any amount of money or a rate increase or anything like that. I'm here to defend the fact that we have to get these projects underway. Is there a better way to do those, or a way to accommodate that? I'm always open to making sure that we are providing public health and safety for our citizens. Now, to get back to your W03, yes, there's a number of W03s. We didn't scientifically develop W01 through W07. We developed that through what our gut is telling us, what our consultants are telling us, and what our professional maintenance people are telling us. This is how we align these projects out. I wish I could give you a defined line on when a particular project's going to fail, or give you a definitive that we can put this one off much longer. We've been putting these projects off for a while. And I think it's important that I think we are in an information gathering, and this is perfect communication. I love the feedback here. We're going to get the same thing from our citizens out there, and then what you have seen in front of you was 7.5% combined. That's not set in concrete. That was just our preliminary look at what the set of projects that we have now that we deemed are important. When we come back for September the 15th, there's a lot of time between in there, and we will take every word that you said and we will evaluate that.
Okay, hold on a second. Councilmember,
Yes,
Mr.
Mayor, Councilmember Clark, and Council. So just want to remind what the purpose of today's workshop is to hopefully give the council a higher degree of understanding of the proposed projects. Once we complete this, we have another workshop scheduled in September. Between now and September, we will take your comments, and then it is an issue of, can there be things that can be extended out? Can we schedule things different? And we will be able to come back in September and provide options to the council as it relates to how that would impact with the rates. So today again was really try to zero in on the individual projects and to make sure there's at least an understanding of what these projects are. We as a staff don't want to underestimate the concern that you have with regards to potentially a 30% increase. Now, again, as Mr. Johnson said, not to justify that, but when you go 7 years with 0 rate increase, and assuming it takes another 6 years to, say, fully implement, what we're really talking about is a 30% increase over 13 years, which is just barely above the rate of inflation. So we've kind of dug ourselves a hole for a variety of reasons, and not a hole that any of you, I believe, are responsible for here at the dais, but the reality of it is we're playing a little bit of catch-up. But again, today's purpose is to go in detail through the variety, and this came as a request of Councilmember Tomachoff initially, so you at least understand what the projects are. We will then get feedback, and then in September, once we've had a chance to have all of our public meetings, we've had a chance to hear what the citizens have input, we can then start designing a rate approach that meets the needs of the council. And so there's an important next step, which will be in September.
Okay, Councilmember Tomachoff, and then Councilmember Clark. You want to talk? No?
Thank you, Mayor. How did we get the 6 years? I mean, where did the 6 year come from?
Mayor, members of the council, normally we do a 10-year CIP. We have a 10-year rate model or, financial analysis. That's what was done by the consultant. We have the first 5 years of the CIP we consider to be funded. So we're looking at the funding sources for that first 5 years. That's what the council sees and adopts is 5 years, is 10 years, but the last 5 years are sort of a lump sum number, and the first 5 years is what the council adopts. The reason why we included 6 years for this particular analysis is simply because we wanted to include the 2017 fiscal year that just ended. There are a number of these projects that Mr. Johnson is talking about that are underway and were in 2017 are carrying over here into fiscal 2018. So it made the most sense to us to include that year as part of the discussion because there's carryover. One of the things that I forgot to mention, and I apologize because I meant to mention this earlier, is that out of that $198 million CIP that we're discussing, about $55 million of it is under contract. Those are contracts that have been approved by the council. And so that we have available fund balance, plus when you go back to this slide, if you'll humor me for a moment here. When you go back to this slide, we have enough fund balance plus that little bit of coming from current rates to fund what's under contract, which is $55 million. That's already underway and under contract. To go back to something that Councilmember Clark said in terms of the criticality of these projects, those, my understanding, and Mr. Johnson can correct me if I'm wrong, is that most critical things are already underway. Those were already identified, those are under contract, and some of those projects are already underway out of the entire $198 million.
Follow up, Mayor. So did the consultant amortize these over a 10-year CIP? Was that what the consultant proposed?
Mayor, Councilmember Tomelchoff, are you talking about the rate consultant or?
Yeah, the rate consultant. You said that you said you used 5 years, they used 10 years. So.
Mayor, Councilmember Tomelchoff, I'm sorry if I misspoke. No, the consultant takes our 10-year plan, which is developed in conjunction with Mr. Johnson and Mr. Friedline, because he's in charge of implementing those capital projects over time, and they look at what is the cash that's going to be needed every year. Then we, as a financial perspective, look at, okay, how would we fund that and how much would have to come from bonds, and all of those things are put into a 10-year model of the rates. We're, again, suggesting at this point, as Mr. Phelps indicated, that we're going to come back to the council at some point. We've developed a couple of options. We'll look at additional options. We're getting the public feedback. We'll plug some things back into that model and then see if there are other options moving forward. But the plan that we have right now was developed over 10 years to show what is going to be required over the longer term for these utilities.
One last follow-up, Mayor, if I may. The $55 million in bonding capacity, is that our limit? Or do we have more capacity to bond than the $55 million?
Mayor, Councilmember Tomelchoff, that's kind of a complicated question. Again, because every time you borrow additional funds, you'll need to have sufficient rates to pay those bonds back. So could we borrow more? There's not a capacity issue statutorily or something like that we're up against. It's balancing available cash and other funding sources and not wanting to pay more interest than we would need to. So we look at it sort of like the opposite way. What are the capital needs, and then what's our best method to fund it, not whether or not we could necessarily borrow more. So I'm not not sure if I answered your question. We could borrow more, but every dollar more that we borrow, we would have to then have sufficient rates to pay it back.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Clark.
Thank you. I know we're not going to talk about rates till September, but it just created a curious question for me. So could council members or this council come back and give direction that we would support, for example, a 5% rate increase over the next 5 years, 5%, 5%. I don't mean just 5% over the entire time. You know what I mean. But, and then would staff try to work within those parameters of the available cash that we are willing to commit to?
Mayor, members of the council, if I may, certainly that's an option, and that if the council and or the public sets the parameters of here's what I'll call it your tolerance, it's kind of like your risk tolerance on an investment. So if your tolerance for a rate increase is 5% a year, and that was the direction that we then received, we'd go back into this rate planning and modeling and see, well, what could we afford to do with that type of rate increase? Again, back to Mr. Johnson and the point of today's workshop, that creates some risk for the utility that projects that he had planned to get done may not get done, but assuming that we're all comfortable with that risk, or that the council is comfortable with that risk, then we'd come back with that type of an option. So it's really, you know, there is a lot that can be done depending on your tolerance for those things, your tolerance for the rate increase versus the risk of some failure within the utility.
Mayor, one last question. So it isn't that they'll never get done. It's just that they might not get done within those first 5 years.
Mayor, members of the council, that's correct, or
Thank
that...
you. That's all I need to know.
Can I finish my response, Mayor?
Please.
Or that if you lower the rate increase in the beginning years, that it might lead to higher rate increases in years further out in order to accomplish that. So everything would get done, it would take longer, and there may be more need to increase rates in the out years. Thank you.
Mr. Turner.
To follow up on that point, that strategy of looking at what our rate tolerance is and planning work around that may mean that the work doesn't get done, but it sounds to me like it opens the window that the work won't get done perhaps until after the failure occurs. That if we're stretching out, if we're driving our, let's say, water capital policy, and we're talking about a public health service that we provide. Water is a public health issue in my mind, just like police and fire are public safety issues. This is a public health issue. If we're driving that based on rate tolerance as opposed to the risk side of failure, then we could well get into the range in which the failure of something is, the likelihood of that is much higher. I don't know if I'm explaining that quite correctly.
Mayor, Councilmember Turner, that's correct. Again, we don't have the crystal ball here. We have our professional consultants and our team of maintenance professionals. It's in our judgment right now. What you see is an appropriate program that keeps us moving forward in a posture that we think is good for the city. But that doesn't mean it's like anything else that there's room. We can have the discussion. We're hearing you. We have a feel for this. And then if there is something that comes up in the arena that you're just talking about, then we can have that discussion further. But I just want to let you know that this program you see right here is a program that's been put off for a while. And kicking the can down the road, it could make it a little more expensive and a little more inconvenient and for us in the future. But I'm not saying that won't happen now. I mean, we have unforecasted failures all the time here, and so we're used to doing that. I think it's very important that we get back in control of this. And so our citizens and the council can feel that we've got good control of what our department is responsible for.
Okay, Mayor, if I may continue,
Sure.
Thank you. And it's not just that the failure in the system may be inconvenient and slightly more expensive. To me, the analogy would be that I buy a set of tires, they come and they tell me how long those tires are going to last, but it depends on how and where I drive them and all of that. And I go to my mechanic says, you need to replace your exhaust system, you need to replace your tires, you probably need a tune-up, and I'm like, I have a certain amount of money, where should I spend it? So the deal is that when you're looking at tires, yeah, I may come out one day and find, headed to work and find out I have a flat. That's inconvenient. But by the same token, that tire could blow out on me while I'm going down the freeway, and then you have a tragedy. So I don't want to get into the range where we're risking the public health of our community simply because, we're looking at a tolerance issue regarding the rates.
Mayor?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So my greatest concern is that I don't know that we have, sounds like these are your priority, but those can always move. And what the mayor was talking about earlier is that, yeah, we have a 6-year plan, we take care of that. That goes away, that's taken care of, it's out of our way now. But now we've got other things coming on board, we have another plan. My point is, the rate increase that we set, we're not changing that. That's not going to go away. If you were to say today that that was going away, I wouldn't believe you, because we have other things coming on. So we really, really have to sit back and decide what that rate increase is going to be. I want to see more of the needs and not the wants. This isn't a wish list. We really want, and that's why I was asking that question, define critical breakdown. And that's what I need, this council member needs to hear, because once we set that rate, it's not going away. Trust me, it's not going away. We have tons of things to fix. So once we set it, we sit back, and that's what it is.
Mayor, Councilmember Aldama, just to reiterate or to expand on what you've just said, that's part of the reason why the rate modeling is done over that 10-year period in anticipation of what's going to be happening out there, so that when you set the rate now, you're kind of looking at what it will generate in the future, and to anticipate what you're talking about, which is additional needs that will occur in the future. On top of that, when we do come back with a recommendation for rates, while we're looking at what we think we'll need over the first 5 years, we recommend to the council to adopt no more than 2 years at the beginning, and then we'll add another year on the end, and we just keep doing that over and over, so that even within the first 5 years, if something changes, we can make an adjustment in year 2 or 3 and change what is what our assumptions are, and update the models on a continuous basis. So we'd anticipate now coming back at least every couple of years to look at this again with the council and see where we are, and see if what we had first predicted at the end of the 5 years is still necessary, if it's more or less than what was in the 10-year plan.
Mayor, thank you for that. A question, earlier in the slide here, it says that we don't subsidize the enterprise fund. It's self-paid by the users. So is that a City of Glendale? Is that a statutory? Why couldn't we talk about subsidizing it with taxpayers' dollars?
Mayor, Councilmember Aldama, the nature of an enterprise fund is that it should be self-supporting. Okay. There is no, to my knowledge, there's no statutory requirement that it either be or not be subsidized. Some utilities do take funds or subsidize their general fund from their utilities. We do not here in the City of Glendale. And, there can be transfers from the general fund to those utilities, but the nature of them is they are designed to be self-supporting.
So I understand that. Thank you. And for those who are watching that may not, you just explained why. But So we need to have that conversation, and what does that look like? I don't know that the council would support it. I'm not certainly saying that that's what we should do. We should just have that conversation. And I don't know if we did any research that we would find other cities or neighboring cities, at least in Arizona, that subsidize with taxpayers. So I'd like to entertain that, to look at that.
Mr. Phelps?
Again, I don't want to cut off discussion, but we are on project 3 of 38 projects that are in your PowerPoint. And again, I would really encourage, I mean, if at the end of the day, this discussion is going to be about rate-driven, we don't need to go to this level of detail. Staff put a lot of work in to try to get this council at least understanding what the projects are. And again, as I say, I think we'll have plenty of opportunity to come back and to propose a variety of different mechanisms, whether it's an extended timeline, whether projects come off. But unless the council doesn't feel this information is valuable, I would recommend at least trying to get a little bit further along than project 3 of 38. And I would also ask Mr. Johnson, as much as we can, is try to summarize these so we can get out of here at a reasonable time.
Mayor, that was a polite cutoff, but that's okay. We're sharing the passion of representing our residents. Thank you, Mr. Phelps.
Mr. Johnson?
Mayor, thank you, Mr. Phelps, for the direction. Next up is our fire hydrant replacement program. This project also includes valves. This is an ongoing project. We have fire hydrants that break every year. We have some hydrants in our system that are no longer supported by parts, and we also have a set of valves that break every year, and we are ongoing year in, year out replacing hydrants and replacing valves. And one of the most important things here is reliability in our system for fire protection, and also for the fact that we minimize the impact to our citizens. If we have good valving system in place, then if we do have a problem in a line, we can minimize the amount of line that has to be isolated, thus reducing the amount of people that's on the affected line that's been turned off. So that's the purpose of this project. Cholla Water Treatment Plant is our next project. This project was built in 1978. It provides 4 billion gallons of water annually. And this project has both plant process improvements in it, with electrical improvements, and also there's 3 booster stations that have pumps in them that need to be replaced. When we replace the pumps, we'll have redundancy for pump systems in there, and then when we replace the chemical feed systems, we'll have backup chemical feeds and redundancy for those, so this plant can continue to maintain operation and support the citizens. And the electrical gear we're replacing is the original electrical gear, and it needs to be replaced with a newer, updated electrical gear. And then the electrical gear now, we have 2 different types. We'll have the same type when we can provide redundancy for the plant and be able to switch off from one to the other, and that makes it better for our citizens.
Councilmember Tomacha.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Were you done talking about this project?
Cholla?
Okay. I have a question on the admin building improvements. What are the admin and building improvements, and how much of this $31 million is for admin building improvements?
Ron, would you like to come up?
Mayor, Councilmember Tomacha, the admin building improvements are about $2 million in total. And the primary things that they include are the roof is really bad. It's leaking. The air conditioning system is beyond its useful life. There's asbestos that's in the building, and it's to get that stuff abated. And those are the primary things that will cover.
Okay, thank you.
Next project is Pyramid Peak Water Treatment Plant Process Improvements. Pyramid Peak was built in 1978 or 87, excuse me, and this is our northern plant that provides water to the northern parts of Glendale down into the central parts of Glendale. It treats 10 billion gallons of water a year, and the costs associated with these process improvements are shared by City of Peoria and with the City of Glendale. Right now, they have a 23% share in costs for everything that goes on out there at the plant. We're going to replace old and obsolete water support systems inside, which means we have backwash system improvements have to be done, and we have water that supplies the plant has to be replaced. And we've got one in system right now, and it's by itself. If that thing fails, the plant fails. So we're going to put a second one in. We're going to have redundant service water for our plant, and that goes to the redundancy there, Councilmember Aldama.
1 second,
Yeah.
I think Councilmember Turner had a question for you.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Johnson, on this Pyramid Peak plant, we've got these capital improvements that we're doing in concert with the City of Peoria.
Yes, sir.
And they share the cost of the portion that is to their benefit.
Yes, sir.
Or they carry the cost of the portion that is to their benefit. That's on capital. Do they carry it likewise on operation and maintenance?
100% of all costs are shared, so including O&M, personnel, supplies, chemicals, everything associated is 23% theirs.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
You don't think we can get them to carry 100% of it, do you?
No, they're going to pay 100% of their expansion here. So in addition to these improvements, we've got the switchgear at Pyramid Peak needs to be replaced also. And one of the key things about Pyramid Peak, and a number of you I think already know it, and for our citizens' benefit, this plant has to continue to operate also as a water treatment plant. It cannot turn over, or it cannot be turned off, because there's no redundant supply of water to make up the water that's needed in the northern area of Glendale. We have another project in here that's going to help improve that situation, but we need Pyramid Peak to be operating up to speed here, and so we don't have a chance of an emergency shutdown and impacting our citizens in the north.
I have a question for you here.
So, thank you, Mr. Johnson. Thank you, Mayor. In the event of a shutdown, what are the consequences? What would happen to the water supply?
Mayor,
Hold it on.
Councilmember Tomachoff, we've got 20 million gallons of storage up there, and we're keeping our water storage in those reservoirs quite high. So that gives us 24 to 36 hours of water, depending on the time of day and time of year. So we've got some water supply in those, stored in those. If that plant shuts down, then we go off of the supply of water that we have stored in the reservoirs. And then we also have a good working relationship with our friends in Peoria. And in the past, when we've had to shut the plant down, they've been willing to turn off their turnout, save the water that we were going to send to them, and they have a redundant set of wells that takes up the slack for the water that's coming to them. So we do have some short amount of time to correct a repair if we have to shut the plant down. If something comes through there that we have no control over, we do have some time. We have another project in here that's going to help make that situation a little better.
Okay, thank you.
Thunderbird Reservoir improvements. This is located in Thunderbird Park. It's a 12 million gallon reservoir, and it was built in '85. And its responsibility is to provide, meet the demand and the fire protection for our citizens in the north and central parts of the city. We're going to be adding 2 mixers and electrical upgrades up there. We've already put a new, what we call a bladder inside the reservoir. It was leaking, so we had that fixed. Thank you very much, Council. We had that fixed, and next thing is get the electrical done, get the 2 new mixers put in, because we have water quality issues at Thunderbird, and we need to correct the water quality issues, and so we don't have to concentrate and impact other parts of the system to make up for the situation we're seeing in Thunderbird Park right now. Failure to complete the project will impact our water quality, or have a tendency to impact our water quality and our ability to meet the EPA drinking water standards. And also, we don't want to impact our fire suppression systems. So. Okay, next up is the Zone 3 water supply improvements. This is one I was talking to you about, Councilmember Tomachoff. This is the Hillcrest Transbooster Station. It's located at 67th and Deer Valley. It was constructed in '92 and went out of service shortly thereafter. I know we want to go fast here, but that was out of service for a reason, because it was not needed anymore after we changed some water zones and we put Pyramid Peak in, and so it was taken out. What we've identified over the last 2.5 years is that we want to make up for a loss of Pyramid Peak some way in our system. This is going to do this for us. We've had it engineered, and we will be able to pump water from Cholla and send it north to the Pyramid Peak and use this pump station to help us with that. And that's why this is an important project, and it will serve as a redundant supply for Pyramid Peak if in case we have an emergency. It'll only be for emergency use only. Recharge storage assessment. We had a study a few years back to determine. Let me back up a minute. We've got recharge capability at our Aqua Recharge facility and at the New River Agua Fria underground storage project, which is owned by SRP. We're part owners in that storage project, and we own the Aqua Recharge facility and both of those facilities take flow from the Western Area Water Reclamation Facility. We've been using those since 2000. We've been using those facilities to put the effluent in and to gain recharge credits for our underground storage. When the NAUSP went in, they had to they reduced our capabilities at the ARF, so we lost some capability there. The NAUSP now, SRP has determined that capability is gone down also, so that's basically shortened our available recharge capacity in those basins. So we went out and wanted to find a new location for that. We found a new location. It's located in close proximity to 83rd Avenue and Bethany Home Road, and we're pursuing that. This project here will finalize the assessment for that location, and then further on, monies will determine the scope of what we have to do from that point on. If we don't have the basically, this is a reliability project because we need the recharge to continue to take our flows so we can actually build our accounts and use that recharge credits for future pumping. Next item is the White Mountain Apache water rights. Congratulations to previous council 2 or 3 times ago. I think Councilmember Clark, you were there. That we are under lease of a 99-year lease with the White Mountain Apaches for 2,363 acre-feet of water per year, and they basically help supplement our assured water supply. And as soon as the legal paperwork and everything is done, we're carrying that in the CIP, and we'll have to pay it. And what we've done in the CIP here is we're paying it over time. We're authorized to pay it over time. This is really a good benefit to the city of Glendale, and will strengthen our ability to provide economic development in the area there. So, any questions on that? Pyramid Peak expansion. Pyramid Peak expansion is 100% funded by the city of Peoria. This also benefits Glendale in the fact that we will have a larger amount of water coming into the plant, and they're not going to take it all at the beginning, but they're planning to be using it, and we'll be able to benefit from the new systems that they've got installed, and basically operate the plant homogeneously, and it'll be a good benefit to the city of Glendale. And upon completion of the plant, they will become a 44% owner, and they'll be picking up 44% of all the costs at Pyramid Peak. 99th Avenue Interceptor, that's our main line in 99th Avenue that takes flows from Glendale, Sun City, Peoria, Phoenix. That's a project that is under control of the Subregional Operating Group, and we are in their O&M responsibility for that. We have ownership in that. So this project is our responsibility for upgrading the 99th Avenue Interceptor as a 91st Avenue wastewater treatment plant project. This helps us because we have a metering station that they're going to replace for us, which we really need. Arrowhead sewer lines. This is a main trunk line that feeds the wastewater to the Arrowhead Water Reclamation Facility. And it basically handles the flows north of Union Hills and transports that flow to the west area. That's 30-year-old line. You can see from some of these pictures through our CCTVing and our cleaning process that we've got some challenges here. We want to get this pipe relined and get these problems in the pipe taken care of, and in doing that, we avoid any collapses in the pipe or any issues that we'd have for stoppages.
Yes, question?
Is that center picture, is that roots growing in the sewer line?
Mayor, Councilmember Tomachoff? Yes. I believe that is root intrusion. Mm-hmm. Okay. Next item is our sewer line replacement project. This is a citywide replacement project that we are doing all the time. So this is a product of our CCTV and our cleaning program, and we grade the pipes out. We identify the worst grade is 5, so we're doing 4s and 5s as we identify them, and we put them into projects, and we continuously are rolling the projects through and replacing the grade 4 and grade 5 pipe conditions. We want to do that because we don't want pipe collapses here. Water and wastewater capital equipment. This is a little different than what you're used to seeing. We've talked about being prepared for particular things that happen unforecasted or unplanned. One of the things that we felt we saw as key for us is that even though we're building a plant or we're planning to build a plant, things are happening in the plants all the time, and to minimize the amount of time to react to these problems that we see at the plants, we'd like to have these 2 projects instituted where we have one water plant, water capital equipment program for water and a capital equipment program for wastewater, and we'll be working with our friends in engineering to develop job order contracting contractors to be on standby to help us for repairs here for emergency, which will help us get these things done in a lot more timely process. Citywide meter vault improvements. Councilmember Clark was talking about that earlier. We have 204. We currently have just completed 37 of them. We got 67 of them to go. There is a contract out there for those projects currently, and these basically these are life safety for our maintenance personnel, and they're also they're structural problems, and you can see the difference between the two, how much more professional and accessible these new vaults are. 91st Avenue construction, the same as 99th Avenue Interceptor. This is the CIP for the 91st Avenue wastewater treatment plant itself. We're 6% owner, and so if they're doing a project down there that takes our flows or that has something to do with Glendale, then we pay our 6% share of the cost for any associated project. And they provide us a CIP, and we just integrate that CIP into our CIP. Oasis water treatment plant improvements. Oasis is 10 years old. It produces 1.7 billion gallons, and it's located over there on Northern and 70th Avenue. We've got chlorine generation. We do generation for chlorine over there. We have no gas. The chlorine generators have a 10-year life, and they are breaking down. So we need to replace the chlorine generators for that. plant, and the plant also has the groundwater treatment plant also has a filtering system in it and that filtering system is not producing and filtering like it should be. So we're wanting to do an assessment on that and determine what our options are for correcting that situation, because right now as it is, we don't get full fulfillment out of the 5 wells that's connected to that groundwater treatment plant, and that's not a good thing for the city. Lift station reconditioning program. We have 7 lift stations in the city right now, sewage lift stations. We need to get proactive on these, and we need to do an assessment on those. We need to find out what we're facing here with any particular issues in these lift stations, because they have to run all the time. So we don't want to be waiting till it breaks, because sewage starts backing up once it's coming into that lift station once it breaks. So you can see from that picture on the right, it's kind of hard to tell, but there is a large impeller in one of the lift stations that needs replacing, and we will have to move forward and repair those. So our maintenance people are looking at these all the time, and we're going to need a professional assessment of that, so we can make sure that we know what we're dealing with and plan accordingly. Manhole rehabilitation, the same as our collection lines, our sewer lines. We've got over 14,000 manholes. We have to stay right on top of those. We're rehabilitating those on an annual basis. Some of them are rated at the same levels as the pipes, level 5 being the worst. So we've got 4s and 5s out there that we're moving forward with, and that's usually about 20 or 30 per year. We just came off of one phase. We're getting ready to start another phase, and these projects keep us from running into a problem with collapsing manholes, sewage backups, and having that, so we have to stay right on top of that. 67th Avenue water line improvement. This is a line that was built in 1987 with the original Pyramid Peak water treatment plant. This one goes from this one we're concerned about now is from Jomex to Union Hills. It pushes 25 million gallons a day. It's the only pipe that we have for that area up there. So we need to do a contingent assessment on it and determine how well we're doing. The good thing about that pipe is it's not under the kinds of pressures that some of our transmission lines are, because everything's coming from Pyramid Peak as gravity. I know I'm getting in the weeds, but I just want to let you know we need to do an assessment on that and see what the condition of that pipe's going to be, so we can deal accordingly with that. If that breaks, then we're out of water at Pyramid Peak for the north area. Distribution system improvements. We have other items in the distribution system besides pipes. We have pressure reducing stations, we have flow meters, and we have electronic control systems. They're over 20 years old. Some of them are reaching the end of their life. We need to assess that and bring those back up to speed. Those are primarily used to control our flow of water throughout the city. So we separate the city into 4 areas, and we transfer water back and forth, and these control our pressure and our flows of water to make sure that all of our citizens have water, and we centrally control that from a central station in Oasis. Citywide well rehab project. We currently have 9 wells that we use now, and we are always looking for an additional opportunity for redundant flow. These are key for us. Redundant flow is one of our big areas of concern right now is in the north area. Of course, as you all might know, the closer we get to the mountains, the harder it is to find suitable well. But we've got a number of SRP wells that we're helping to pay for the maintenance and the rehabilitation on those. Plus, we want to look at an opportunity for additional well sites in our system to help us with redundant flow, because if we ever have a drought and a shortage and mayor and council say, okay, turn on your wells, we want to be able to have the wells there so we can continue to provide the water to our citizens. Sewer Vector trucks, we have 2 of those in this program right now. The first one's coming up next year. These are the workhorses for the line cleaning in the city, and they take a beating, and they're both 12 years old, and they're beyond their useful life, and they're very highly. It's costing us a lot now to maintain them, and we need to replace them when they come up for replacement, and we'd like to start the procurement for the first one for next year. Wastewater collection improvements is the same thing for our distribution system improvements. There's also, instead of pressure reducing valves, we have air relief valves, we have odor control systems, and we have pieces of the force mains that had to be replaced as part of all this. And so this basically earmarks a project to take care of those things that we're identifying as far as collection system improvements during our inspection program.
Question?
Please.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
Mayor, Mr. Johnson, I want to back up just a notch here onto the sewer Vector trucks.
Yes.
So we have 2 that were purchased in '05 and '06. We need to replace those. Are these trucks something that are used on a virtually daily basis? Are they out all the time?
Mayor, Councilman Attorney, yes, they're used every day. They're out there on the street every day, and they're the ones that you see out in the neighborhoods, and they're cleaning the sticking their hose in the manholes, and they're pushing the fluid south and keeping our lines clean.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Water line replacements, this is another big, another important project for the city, because if you look at this picture we have, we want to avoid this. Since I've been the director here, we've had this happen to us 4 times. We don't want to have it happen any. But this came from a small 6-inch line. Okay, so the key to this is getting your valve placements in there so you can isolate and get these lines turned off as soon as possible. Also, our conditioning program, we've gone through and replaced all that pipe now in Bethany Home Road, so that's done. We've got that taken care of. But we've got 7 miles of line replacement that's coming up that we need to have done. It's where our average age is over 35 years, and so we got to maintain our fire protection, and we got to maintain efficiencies and hold down the extensive damage in private property that a large break like this can do. So basically, we're looking at funding about 7 miles. Laboratory equipment. We have a water quality lab up at Pyramid Peak. It has 5 different laboratories, 5 lab rooms in it, and they each have their 2 or 3 pieces of equipment. The equipment is basically, they each have independent operations, so you have to be able to keep those particular instruments, because the laboratory is funny about mixing equipment with constituents, and chemists are funny about that. So each one of them have their own standalone equipment that does its own special items. And so we've got 2. We've got one that needs to be replaced. Item. It's outlived its useful life, and it's not being serviced anymore. And we've got a water system up there that needs to be replaced, and that's what this project will be for, to keep the lab in operation. If we lose the lab, we have a contract. We can send the lab material out, and we're not going to be losing our water quality information. Storage and recovery wells. We have, going back to the effluent I was talking about and the recharge, Arrowhead Reclamation Facility has recharge wells up there. When the effluent leaves Arrowhead, it goes to the lakes at Arrowhead. And in the summertime, it'll take all the water we produce at the plant. In the wintertime, it takes less water than we produce, so we recharge it. We have 2 of these wells, in a couple, 3 years, are going to need to be replaced because they're starting to fill up and clog up, which is normal for that type of well, and we need to put a project to get those wells refurbished so we can continue to support Arrowhead. Integrated master plan. We talked about master planning early. This is critical to the city for development and evaluating our capacity for future use. We have We have a master plan now for water, which is 14 years old. We don't want it to be any older than 8 to 10 years, and we have wastewater master plan, which is 10 years old. We want to include reclaimed water and stormwater in this next integrated master plan and have it all looked at homogeneously from one overall program, and that will help us for our development, help us for our future planning, and make sure that we're out there and forward looking at our projects and supporting our development the way it needs to be. That's what. Vehicle replacement. We've recently moved our vehicle replacement now into the CIP. We have 194 vehicles. That includes, backhoes, forklifts, trailer-mounted generators, and so what you see in here is the amount of money per year we intend to spend with fleet to replace these vehicles, and we do that in coordination with fleet to make sure that a vehicle, it may be over 10, 12 years old, but it still may be serviceable, and we work with them to make sure we do an efficient purchase of vehicles. Water system security. Our plants and facilities, we are critical infrastructure. We're monitoring all of our cameras and our keypads, card pads, 24 hours, 7 days a week. Those things wear out because they're continuously working. So we do have, and all the time we're looking for additional points to where we think we need to put these additional cameras to make our system more secure. This program will help us identify those areas and purchase the additional cameras and keypads that we need to maintain our security posture. Accrue of long-term storage credits. This is basically our water bank. We've got 3 years of water stored underground right now, that 3 years worth. So that's very key for the city of Glendale. We want to keep the water banking, and one of the key things on the water banking is our effluent goes in the ground, goes towards this, and so does the CIP water that you've been seeing in the CIP. We've been taking some of our CIP allocation, we're putting it underground for future water banking, and one of the key things to that is when I first got here, we were paying $147 an acre foot for CIP. Now we're paying $181, and by 2020 it'll be up to over $200 an acre foot. So the more water we put underground at the lowest possible cost is better for the city of Glendale. These two projects, water line extension and sewer line extension, these are our development line items. We work with engineering and land development on any particular projects that come in where if they're going to develop in our right-of-way, if they're going to develop a process or a project, and we have a need for a project that's either going to be associated with that or whatever, or we need to extend something, then these line items can be used for the city to pay their portion of having a developer do the work, and we can use these line items to help pay our portion of what we'd like for them to do. And good example is the TOs. We had them make 2 connections to the Johnson property on the west end and connection to our property there, and we'll pay them for doing that for us, and we can use that. SCADA study, replacement, supervisory control, and data acquisition. We need to have our SCADA system looked at and have it reviewed by a professional firm and look at how well we're doing. IT is working with us, and we're very tight with IT, so we're going to work together with this because that SCADA system operates all of our facilities 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Without it, we'd have to get 3 times more people. So this is a very key component for our system, and all municipal utilities use the same type of system. So we need to have that evaluated, make sure we're staying up with that and making sure that it's maintained appropriately. Last item. Sewers for areas on septic systems. This is an item that's been in the CIP for the Water Service Department for a while. Basically, what this does is set aside some money if there's a development like Hidden Manor, thank you very much. Like Hidden Manor, if there's citizens that have septics in there, and if they joined the city several years back to hook up to septics, and so there's a program here where the city can come in and if they meet the requirements stipulated by engineering department, we can come in with a main line, and they can pay the impact fees, and then they can pay a plumber to tie into it. That completes my presentation.
Questions? No questions.
Mayor?
Mr. Turner?
Thank you, Mayor. For citizens who have been watching this today or may watch it in the future and don't have the slideshow that you've just run through with us, if they'd like to have a copy of that, they can download it off the city's website, I would think.
Yes, sir. Yeah, we will have it posted on our website.
You'll have it posted on the Water Services, and it's also part of the agenda for today's meeting that citizens can go there and click it down, or I'm sure they could contact their council member if they don't have internet capability. And
we'll also put it on. We'll also post the white paper on our website also.
If they contact their council office, we'll be happy to have the Water Services Department send them one. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Friedland, you're up.
Yeah, is this working, Mayor?
No?
No.
Does it have a button on it?
Try that one.
We'll try this. Thank you, Mayor, City Council. I really don't know if I can follow this presentation. I only have 6 items and $20 million in capital over a 10-year period, but I'll do the best. Basically, in the solid waste collection enterprise, our focus is really on equipment replacement. And we have side loaders, as you see on the picture. That equipment collects recycling and also garbage barrels. We have rear loaders. Is it still a problem?
I'm not sure. Everybody hear him okay?
No, his mic is not working.
Yeah, just hold it really close to your mouth.
Okay, I'll do the best I can.
Okay.
We have the pieces of equipment we use are side loaders for recycling and garbage collection. We use rear loaders and tractors for our monthly bulk item collection system. We have sweepers in our inventory, and we also have pickup trucks that we replace on a continuous cycle. Just to take you through the each and every category, the side loaders, we have 26 of those. I think we reduced it to 25 now. We'd like to get those on a 6 or 7 year cycle. We're not there yet. 6 or 7 year cycle, meaning the extended life of that piece of equipment past 6 or 7 years suggests that the maintenance costs go way above what we would think is acceptable, and it's time to replace that piece of equipment with a new piece and keep the cycling going such that we have a 6 or 7 year cycle, maybe 3 or 4 vehicles bought every year, so that we have a reliable piece of equipment out in the field such that it doesn't break down, such that there's no hydraulic leaks on our streets that cause damage, such that we are providing the service to our customer as they expect on a daily basis. This would also include our rear loaders and our tractors, where the expectation is we get through 4 areas every month and we do monthly collection. We need to keep the life cycles with reference to all these pieces of equipment such that they are reliable and they don't break down in the field. So for our side loaders, our total 10-year expenditure is just a little bit less than $11 million a year, or excuse me, over the 10 years. The next category, as I mentioned before, it's loose trash collection. We try to keep an 8-year cycle with reference to our rear loaders and our tractors. We're not anywhere near close to that right now. We're working towards that. And over a 10-year period, our expenditures would be close to $5.7 million.
I have a question for you.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Friedline, what is the approximate cost per household for the bulk trash collection?
I believe the breakout was close to $3.30 some out of the $16.30 paid.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. The next is our pickup. We use pickup trucks for our crew leaders, our foremen, and some for 2 mechanics that we have that do infield repairs of our equipment. And again, we try to get those close to a 10-year cycle. I think as Councilmember Turner mentioned before, that's a generalization. If we have more miles on a vehicle, but the maintenance, we review our maintenance costs. If they're very low, we'll keep those vehicles. The last 2 items, the first one deals with office space study, and we've allocated $200,003 over a long-term period of 10 years, starting in 2019, and that's to accommodate some type of office and assembly area for our drivers. We currently have a double wide at our service center on Myrtle Avenue, and frankly, it was installed there some years ago temporarily. It's the way we address meetings with our drivers is we attend meetings when they start their shift at 4 a.m., 4:30, 5:30, and 6, and we never really get them assembled. We're hoping that we'll be able to master plan that whole service center and get one assembly area where all field people can use, and we can utilize it efficiently. The last piece is solid waste information systems. Those are just, we have $100,000 in 2019. I would expect that in the out years we'd have more. What we're trying to do is keep up, not even keep up, catch up with technology with reference to especially routing software systems, where we can be a little bit more efficient with reference to routing our collection areas, whether it's for our bulk trash or for our residential routes. And hopefully as we grow, we'll need a technology that can quickly reroute so we can always maintain an efficiency in our routing. So the next 2 slides, unless there's any questions
Mayor?
with reference to my capital.
We do have a question.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Friedline, several of these categories you just discussed were vehicles that have a lifespan. I assume they have some residual value once we're finished with them, and if so, how do we go about recovering that residual value?
Yes, Mayor, Councilmember Turner, yes, they do have a residual value, and we auction those off, and we've seen if we catch up with the life cycle that we want, there actually is more value in the equipment such that we get that back into the vehicle replacement fund. In this case, it would go to the enterprise fund and stay with solid waste. Thank you.
Mayor, if I can, to follow up so I'm clear, that if you actually don't totally wear out that piece of equipment, you may recover a fairly good amount of money at the end by selling it maybe to a private enterprise or a community that has low demand and will do fine with an older piece of equipment?
Mayor, Councilmember Turner, within reason, I would say that we want to run that piece of equipment until, if anybody bids on that in an auction, presumably they would have to make a pretty good investment to make sure that it runs efficiently and effectively.
Thank you, Mr. Friedline. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. And then just to remind the City Council of the outreach for all of these rates. Last week, I think we had a productive public meeting more focused on the Facebook application. Well over 1,000 people were participating in that over at the Glendale Regional Public Safety Training Center. This Thursday, we'll be at the Foothills Recreation and Aquatics Center from 6 to 8. And then August 12th, on a Saturday morning, 10 a.m. to noon, we'll be at a City Hall in the lower level basement. And then August 15th, we'll be at the Glendale Adult Center from 6 to 8 also.
Question for you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Friedline. Is this an open house type forum? Because I want to make sure constituents know you don't have to stay there from 6 to 8. You can come and get the information that you want, and is that right?
Yes, Mayor, Councilmember Talmachoff, this is an open house. We kind of have it segregated into two parts, the water services area and the solid waste collection area. We have many stations in each area where people can look at posters, talk to staff, whether it's about the service we provide, whether it's about some of the efficiencies that we've been trying to create and enhance to better service them and do it more efficiently. And then a discussion about the rate options and also the type of services we provide and get their input with reference to how critical those services are to them, because there's always a give and take with reference to what people pay and what services they want. So it's good to get that feedback.
Thank you, Mayor. As a follow-up, so I just wanted to make sure that the people who are listening understand that if you can't be there by 6 and you can only be there by 7, still go, because it's still worthwhile. So I just wanted to make sure that was out there.
We'll be there till 8 p.m. and if we have to, we'll stay longer.
Mayor?
Yes, sir.
And if I may additionally add to that, that also the design of them is such that you don't have to stand up at a microphone in front of a room full of people to get your question answered. You can approach on a one-to-one basis an individual and ask it and get your answers that way too.
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Turner's very casual. Welcome all. And again, we have almost one-to-one staff to be able to discuss any issues that they may have with water services or solid waste services.
Okay.
And the next steps, just a reminder, is August 8th. That'll be next week. There'll be the notice of intent on the City Council agenda. September 6th, we'll be presenting to the Citizens Utilities Advisory Commission on the results of the public meetings. And September 19th, which is a workshop, we'll be presenting also to the City Council the feedback that we received. And then October 24th is the goal to have a public hearing and council vote on proposed rate schedules, either effective December 1st or January 1st or whatever dates that the council chooses.
All right. Councilmember Aldama.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to be clear, for the August 12th meeting that's being held at City Hall, lower level basement, is that the lounge downstairs or somewhere else?
Mayor, Councilmember Aldama, right now, yes, I think it's going to be employees' lounge. We'll have plenty of signage and people to guide people into the area.
If the need be, it can be moved into the chambers if needed?
If we see an overflow need, we'll accommodate, we'll adapt.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, thank you.